Welcome to Introduction to Fundraising Planning. Today's moderator for Introduction to Fundraising Planning is Alexis Flanagan. Alexis is Candid's Network Engagement Manager for the Southern region of the United States. Alexis represents Candid's activity in the Atlanta, Georgia region. What is Candid? On February 1st, 2019, Foundation Center and GuideStar joined forces to become Candid, a 501c3 organization. Together, these organizations brought a combined 88 years of expertise and millions of data points to Candid. Why Candid? Every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where the money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. We believe that an effective social sector is critical to a thriving society, and we believe in the importance of solutions for the sector and by the sector. With Candid, nonprofits, foundations, donors, and the public can be all on the same page. How does Candid do its work? Through research, collaboration and partnerships, and training, Candid connects people who want to change the world to the resources they need to do it. In response to the COVID-19 crisis, Candid has created a pop-up learning page, which you can find on our main website, candid.org. We would like to thank you for being part of Candid's learning community. With the evolving coronavirus COVID-19 crisis, we know it's a challenging time for everyone. We hope that you've been safe and are well. To prioritize the safety and health of our communities during this time, Candid has shifted many of our in-person programs to an online virtual format so that you are able to continue your professional development. To learn more about changes in our programming and how you can stay connected with us and our free resources, click on the bit.ly link on the screen in front of you. Find out more at candid.org. You can see more on our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is @candid.org. Sign up for our online newsletter to stay in touch with our Candid learning communities. Today's speaker for Introduction to Fundraising Planning is Susan Shiroma. Susan is our Network Engagement Manager for the Northeast United States. Susan is normally headquartered out of our New York City office and has spent 25 years working for Foundation Center and now Candid. Introduction to Fundraising Planning. Here we go. All right. Upon completion of this training, you should be able to explain the basic steps for developing a fundraising plan, identify your organization's assets, develop a case statement for your organization, set realistic fundraising goals for your organization. And lastly, we hope you feel confident in drafting a fundraising plan. What is a fundraising plan? We like to think that a fundraising plan should be viewed as a living document which lays out specific fundraising tasks and strategies, including who on your team will be responsible for completing these strategies and tasks, and the timetable or calendar for which they need to be accomplished by. So a fundraising plan is a living document that tells you how much money you are going to raise each month of the year and by what methods. It has a calendar and timetable. And because it's a living document, you are evaluating your fundraising success on a monthly basis, and you should be able to pivot as needed if you aren't raising the money that you estimated, that you projected you were going to raise in the 6 months before you created this fundraising plan. The 6 steps for developing a fundraising plan are: 1, identify your assets. How do we figure out what your organization's strengths and weaknesses are? How do we figure out if there are any opportunities that you may not be taking advantage of? How do we find a way to be knowledgeable in any potential threats to the growth of your organization? So, knowing what you're best at is the key to identifying your assets. Knowing what your weaknesses are is a key to identifying your assets. Step 2, really think hard about developing a case statement for your organization. That case statement is an internal document that you craft, which sets forth all of the reasons, all of the arguments why we, the public, should invest finances in your organization. It's an internal document, but every day that you're fundraising and have to make a statement verbally or in writing to argue your case for support, you can use your case statement. So, step 2, develop a case statement for your organization. You will use it every time you need to ask the public for support. Step 3, let's find a way to set realistic fundraising goals for our team. We don't want to overstretch and we don't want to underproject our fundraising goals. We need to find a way to be accurate and realistic in our fundraising goals. Step 4, how do we create this action plan? Once you've figured out what your strengths and weaknesses are, once you've had that conversation about your funding history and its successes, once you've developed a case statement for your office and set realistic fundraising goals, it's time to create a fundraising plan, which puts it all in paper as to what we will do month by month to raise money for our organization. Step 5, implementing the plan. For some of us, this might be easier said than done because you can't run a fundraising plan all by yourself. A fundraising plan builds consensus and buy-in amongst your team as to what your fundraising priorities are and how you're going to raise the money. So implementing the plan is crucial, and team works very well in this instance. So team is spelled T-E-A-M, and it does mean together, everyone achieves more. So a good fundraising plan is crucial. 6, evaluating your plan. Remember, a good fundraising plan makes you project fundraising income month by month. So there is a calendar and a timetable attached to these plans. If you are taking a moment every month to evaluate how your fundraising plan is going, you can pivot. And throughout the year, over a course of 12 months, you'll also want to evaluate your plan. Was all of this time and effort, was it worth it to my organization? Ideally, after the first year, year 2, you should be able to craft a better fundraising plan because you'll have actual knowledge in terms of what worked and what didn't work for the team that you're working with. So we do have 6 steps for developing a fundraising plan. Step 1, identify your organization's assets. Step 2, develop a case statement. And again, that case statement is all of the arguments why we, the public, should be supporting your organization right now and into the future. Step 3, set realistic fundraising goals for your team. Step 4, create that action plan. Create that fundraising plan to raise the money. Step 5, implement your plan. And step 6, evaluate your plan on a monthly basis because you want your plan in year 2 to be tweaked so it can be more efficient. All right, the next screen we're looking at right now is a pie chart from the National Center for Charitable Statistics at the Urban Institute. This is in today's class on fundraising planning to give you a sense of nationally where nonprofit revenue comes from. So when you do look at this plan, the first thing you might notice is nearly 50%, 47.5% of nonprofit revenue comes from fees for services and goods from private sources. So this is here to remind you of the power of earned income to support your nonprofit organization. If you know that 47.5% of nonprofit revenue, when we look at nonprofits on a national basis, is from fees for services and goods from private sources, you might want to consider developing an earned income stream for your office. So an example of a fee for goods, a fee for a service from private sources might be, you think of your college days, the tuition payments from students in higher education. That certainly is an important source of income for higher education organizations. It could also be admission fees to performances and events. Put this under the umbrella of earned income. Elsewhere in this chart, one of the second larger categories on nonprofit revenue is fees for services and goods from government sources. That's about 24.5%. And when you look at that figure, fees for services and goods from government sources, think about nonprofits that receive Medicare and Medicaid payments. This class does focus on your ability to raise money from the private contributions. So in this pie chart focusing on nonprofit revenue, private contributions are about 13.3% of nonprofit revenue. And this addresses your ability as an organization to raise money from individuals, foundations, corporations, and other sources. So when you look at 13.3% of this pie for nonprofit revenue as private contributions, think about charitable giving in America today. Think about your ability to build a knowledge base back in your office about securing grants from private foundations and corporations, as well as individuals. Now, the government makes up about 8% of this nonprofit revenue. Government grants, 8% of nonprofit revenue. And again, this is your ability as a nonprofit to assess your chances of getting a grant from the federal government, state government, more local government, county level governments. Are you in a position to secure funding from government sources? Investment income, slightly smaller, 4.8%. And then you have this much smaller category here, 1.9% of nonprofit revenue is tagged other income. An example of that would be membership fees. Some of you may be representing organizations today that have membership fees, membership dues, which help to support you. Now, one of the things when you look at this chart, remember 47.5% of nonprofit revenue is earned income. You do need to build your knowledge these days to secure, to do a better job securing grants from private contributions. However, if you add the 24.5% fees for services and goods from government sources with the 8% government grants here, you got about 33% of this pie regarding nonprofit revenue. 33% is from government grants or fees for services and goods. So when you were thinking about your fundraising planning, do have at least one person on your team who becomes the expert at securing these private contributions, and have one person on your team who really likes to comb through all the government resources to see if you're eligible for a government grant, or if you as a nonprofit provide a service or a good that you can secure government funding for. And again, Candid resources specialize in the private contribution side of nonprofit revenue. All right, this is one of my favorite pie charts. I've been looking at this for at least 25 years. It comes out once a year in an annual statistical publication called Giving USA. What you are looking at today on this webinar is the Giving USA 2019 Statistical Review. And these days, Giving USA is researched and written and published by the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. So we're looking at private contributions by source to America's nonprofit sector. What you'll notice immediately on this pie chart is that 68% of giving in the last year for which Giving USA is tracking, 68% of giving in America is from individuals. That's about 2/3 of the pie nationally. When Giving USA 2019 was published, every philanthropy researcher and philanthropy buff stopped what we were doing to take a look at these figures. For the first time in 40 years in American history, giving by Americans as individuals went down below 70%. Still not to worry too much. It's still about 2/3 of the pie, but it is a trend that we want to pay attention to. Now, the foundation piece of this is a very robust 18% of private contributions by source from Giving USA 2019 were the foundation grants. Now, view foundations as institutions. What is your ability to secure financial support from the private foundation community in America? Definitely the numbers of foundations that are being established every year is going up. Giving USA 2019 did take a look at foundation giving. It went up a bit. So 18% of the pie, foundation grants. And you will definitely be using Candid resources such as Foundation Directory Online Professional to secure foundation grants. Foundation Directory Online Professional will allow you to sift through over 225,000 grant makers to figure out which ones are the best matches for your organization, and of that group, which of those best matches are absolutely the most stellar fits between your project and what that foundation giving is all alike. Foundation Directory Online Professional will also give you deadlines, and it will tell you how to apply and who you need to talk to. So please note as well on this pie chart, giving you details on private contributions by source, that corporate giving is listed as 5%. So we're going to view the for-profit sector. These would be corporations and businesses. View them as institutions as well. What is your case for support to secure corporate gifts to your organization? So when you're looking for corporations as a source of support, and certainly Foundation Directory Online Professional has many, many, many major corporations in it. When you look at corporations as a source of support, start with Foundation Directory Online, but also remember to brainstorm about private companies that are going to be right there in the city and state that you are operating in. Now, 9% of this pie is from an activity that we call bequests. And this is where there's like $1 trillion transfer of wealth happening in America today. Whereas when parents don't need their money anymore, they're using their wills to make bequests to either their children or to their favorite charities. So very difficult to project how an individual in your neighborhood, in your community, whether or not they're going to leave you something in their will. But at 9% of this pie, bequests is a type of private contribution that you do want to keep in mind. It might be as simple as in your friend and donors letter, putting a little tagline in there, speak to your lawyer about leaving us in your will. You will find a more elegant way to say, speak to your lawyer about leaving us in your will. But you've put the thought in my mind, and when I'm ready to work on my will, I will speak to my lawyer and try to remember my favorite charity. So for the purposes of today's class, we're talking about your ability to kind of look at nonprofit revenue by source. We're talking about your ability to understand generally on a national basis how private contributions break down. When you look at this chart, I do want you to reflect on what your funding history is up until this point. If you know 2/3 of giving in America is from individuals, what do we do in our nonprofit shop to secure money from individuals? You have wonderful access throughout the United States and in other countries to Candid resources. What is your ability to secure a grant, to secure a supporter in that 18% of this pie, which are the grants that private foundations pay out? What is your ability to secure corporate support? Bequests, very slow to get. Foundations, we're still going to tell you we think it takes 4 to 6 months to get a foundation to say yes or no to us. Individuals perhaps can make up their minds a lot quicker. So you have 12 months a year in your fundraising strategy to raise money. You are going to be using Foundation Directory Online Professional to do a deep dive into the foundation piece of this and the corporate piece of this to attempt to diversify your funding income. Now, when we go into each of your organizations and do a little look-see as in what's your funding history, where has the money been coming from up until this point, your funding mix is going to be different. These pie charts show you a national breakdown. Arts and culture might look different from education. Education might look different from those of you who work in the field of the environment and animal welfare. But it is good to know what these breakdowns look like on a national level. So we did say we were going to go through 6 steps to create a fundraising plan. One of the first steps was knowing your assets. How do we identify your assets? How do we identify, early on, are there any weaknesses about your organization that we need to start paying attention to? So we're going to need to find a way to identify your assets. And, broadly speaking here, we're looking at your human resources as well. What are your current organizational strengths? Examples of what makes a strong organization might even be when we hear your mission statement. Why were you created to exist as a nonprofit? Is it compelling? Do you have a mission statement that attracts donors? Do you have a mission statement that attracts interest in your work? And these days as well, I'm going to say, if I went to your website and looked in the About Us area, I would like to see your mission statement there. I would like to also see a statement about your vision for society, as well as the values that your team supports. Do you have a large public base of support? Or is this something we need to work on? Is there name recognition of your nonprofit organization within your community and within the field that you are active in? We're talking about fundraising planning here, so we do have to look at your board. How well connected is your board and your staff leadership team? So we would start with your board. If you have 10 board members, are they all contributing financially to your organization? Even if they don't have a lot of money, are they giving you at least $50 a year? As in, how can you go out and ask others to give to your organization if you don't have 100% of your board members contributing? Do you have a great facility? So now we're looking at the physical side of your work. Do you have an office? If you have an office, do you have the right kind of office to do your work? And high traffic website, are you on social media? Are people coming to you? So one technique to identify your assets is to use one of these classic strategic planning tools called a SWOT analysis. Sometimes it's called a SWOT matrix because you're literally dividing a page into 4 corners. And SWOT means S stands for strengths, W, weaknesses, O stands for opportunities, and T stands for threats. So as part of your strategic planning process, doing a SWOT analysis or a SWOT matrix at the very beginning is a great way for you to brainstorm as a team about where you are right now. So when we start to jot down your strengths and weaknesses, these are usually seen as internal drivers. Opportunities and threats, I'd like you to view them as external factors. Legislation. Is there upcoming legislation in Washington, D.C. that might be a potential opportunity or threat for your nonprofit organization? Are there technological changes happening in the world today that could be an opportunity or a threat to the way you work? Are there social cultural changes happening in America or abroad today that might be potential opportunities for your work or threats? So the SWOT analysis, visualize a piece of paper, turn it into 4 corners, and label those corners. One corner, upper left-hand side, you might want to label as strengths. And this is where you're literally going to take out those golf pencils and start brainstorming and jotting down what you think the strengths of your nonprofit is. And the ultimate goal of doing a SWOT analysis is to identify your assets. This is part of a strategic planning process that would take, but you are also using this to figure out what your advantages are in the nonprofit sector. And it's good to know our advantages, but we also want to know where we're weak because we can always improve. So you want to jot down your strengths, label another box weaknesses, one box will be labeled opportunities, and one box will be labeled threats. And this is, you might have to brainstorm as a team about this, but it shouldn't take you that long to fill out a SWOT analysis. And again, opportunities and threats are usually external. Strengths and weaknesses are usually internal. And you could start as well with your human resources. Do you have the talent you need to move your mission forward? So step 2 is all about developing a case statement. Now, these case statements, it's an actual document that you would have in your office. It's usually viewed as an internal fundraising piece. This is a memo that you write. It could be 4 to 6 pages in length. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, but it's usually viewed as internal because it sets forth in really clear, concise, and compelling writing. It sets forth all of the reasons why your nonprofit deserves and merits financial support right now, today, and way into the future. So for you to develop a good, compelling case statement, you'll really want to get a sense of where you want to be like 10 years from now in the future. And if writing is not your thing this month, just start using numbers. Start with number 1, 2, 3, 4, and don't stop until you get to 100. Don't stop until you give me 100 reasons why your nonprofit organization deserves and merits financial support from the public right now and into the future. You actually have everything you need right now to craft a really terrific case statement. And by the way, you're normally going to craft that case statement and you will show it to your board members, and it will make your board members cry with joy. You'll see the tears coming up in their eyes, and hopefully they'll dig down into their wallets and give you more money because you just reminded them of all of the reasons why they serve on your board. So when I said you have everything you need right now to write a case statement, I meant it. You've got internally documents that address your mission and the values that your organization holds dear. You definitely should have documents that describe the programs and services that you are offering the public, as well as their outcome and results. Like, how do you know that you've actually running a successful after-school program? So we want to see those descriptions of your programs and services, as well as a piece on their outcomes. Certainly somebody on your team loves to keep track of all of your accomplishments. You should have a little something in your office that discusses your plans for the future. If not, put something time in this summer into discussion where your nonprofit wants to be 5 years and 10 years down the line. And of course, you have to put a price tag on it. Otherwise, how do you know how much money you need to raise? So a good case statement also drops a few numbers on us, and it tries to give us a very upbeat sense of what your budget needs are. By the way, if you had done the SWOT analysis, the SWOT matrix, I might have seen somewhere in there, remember the opportunities and threats addresses, what's happening in your environment. Are you in a city that has a growing population of seniors? Do you need to address that? That might make its way into the plans for the future. Are you in a city that's like developing really rapidly? That's going to have an impact on the needs in your community. So a good matrix, a good SWOT analysis helps me fill in the details when I'm crafting a case statement. So you show it to your board members, they cry with joy because you've just reminded them of all the best reasons why we, the public, should be supporting you philanthropically. And you're going to use it 52 weeks a year, because assuming 52 weeks a year, at one point each week, you have to go out there and ask someone or some organization for money. If you ever have writer's block when you're crafting like a one-page letter or a proposal to a foundation, or if you're working on a pamphlet for your organization, just pull out your case statement. You can lift the language out of that and get inspired on the spot, because you've already got a document that tells us why we need to be supporting you, why we need to be investing money in your nonprofit. So at this point, we know why we need to ask the public for philanthropic support. We actually know why the public should be supporting us philanthropically. It's time to set fundraising goals. And there's a couple of ways you can look at setting realistic fundraising goals. You can look at an annual fundraising goal. I mean, you know exactly how much money you have in your budget next year to support your programs, and you should know how much it costs to do everything you want to do in year 2 of your organization. The difference between those might end up being your annual fundraising goal. If you're running like 2 or 3 programs, if you have 2 or 3 programs under your belt, you probably have a boss or director who's literally telling you every year how much money the board has allocated to those programs. And again, the difference between that, what you have in the bank and what's been allocated, is going to be your program goal. So we want to set realistic fundraising goals. If you have never raised $1 million over the course of 12 months, perhaps that's not a goal that we want to set for ourselves. Start small, build your confidence, and then your funding history of how much money you've actually raised from which source is going to show you where you should be moving next year. So best advice here to set a realistic fundraising goal is to start exactly where you are. If you're not the money person in your organization, sit down with somebody who has a much better sense of where the money has been coming from for the last couple of years to support you, and have that person break it down. How much money has come from individuals, corporations, foundations, government grants, any earned income streams? If you have a museum, I do want you to even be recording income from your gift shop. We want to know where everything comes from. And that's going to show you where you've been successful in your fundraising. Start there, build on your previous success. So, simply, who are your current funding partners? Who are the largest funding partners? Where could you strengthen your funding base? If I see in your current funding partners that you have, 1 or 2 family foundations that are local to your city, we're going to put some think time in and do the research with Foundation Directory Online Professional. Are there any other local family foundations that we might be pitching to? Who does your board know? Who does your staff know? If you're volunteer driven, chances are you've got some volunteer leaders who know people that they might be able to refer to your organization. If I see you have a couple of national level funders in your list of current funding partners, I'm going to try to think of, should we pitch to another national level funder next year? So looking at the mix of where you are right now is going to help us determine how to build upon our successes. And if you have no foundation support, then we're going back to the database and we're going to kind of start to ask ourselves, is this a good year to begin looking for that foundation support? 2/3 of giving in America is from individuals. How much do you really know about how individuals in your community are supporting their local nonprofits? And again, we're definitely going to use your board members to try to reach out to other potentially major donors for your organization. So one way to think about diversifying the funding streams coming into your nonprofit to keep you sustainable would be to like view streams, rivers, ocean. So if we're using the stream river approach, each of these streams is feeding into the river to make it grow and be vital. You have your stream of income from individual donors. 68% of giving last year was individuals making contributions to nonprofits. So can you grow a stream of individual donations? If you're already being supported, you have an active stream of individuals supporting you, we're going to like look at those contributions and see if we can move any of these individual gifts up a notch or two to perhaps being a major donor for your organization. Foundations, okay, their giving went up the last time Giving USA came out. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We may be heading into a recession. So this is really a good time to begin looking at your fundraising plans and evaluating them and looking to areas where you may have to pivot at this point in the year. We should definitely be looking at 2021, the fundraising plans that we'll be working on to see how we can enhance our fundraising plans. So foundations might be an area of growth for us. If you haven't worked with the new Foundation Directory online professional database, definitely use it. But again, when you're looking at these streams of income, foundation grants are what we call slow money. So give yourself about 4 to 6 months to get these foundations to say yes or no to you. Government funding, as in who has the most amount of money in America today to support our thriving nonprofit sector, it would always be the federal government first. So, go through a process in your office. Are you representing a nonprofit today that can secure federal grants? The government gives money to the state governments give money to more localized government. Are you in a position to secure money from any of your state agencies or city agencies or county level governments? And you should pay attention to the news. If we move into a recession, the government funding of nonprofits might not be as stable and as secure as it has been in previous years, which forces you, again, to look at your funding streams and try to figure out is there any way that I can, if government funding goes down, can I secure more grants from foundations? And the foundation community is incredibly diverse. There are large national, international funders. Most foundations in America are still family controlled and they tend to be more local. Who are you missing? And certainly we should be using this time to begin reaching out to our local community foundations. Individual donors, all right, so Giving USA 2019 set it at 68%. That's still about 2/3 of giving. How can you attract money from individuals? Special events may be off the table this year because folks are just not wanting to be in spaces with other people. Can you move those events online? Can you figure something else out to replace your special event and any money that you'd already projected you would have earned from those galas? So what's missing on the stream? You've got a couple of other streams here. So this would be when you're creating stability for your office and thinking of diversifying your income streams. What are we missing here? Corporate is certainly not on this picture, but it is definitely a possibility for you. Bequests, that's not quick money. So, normally they wouldn't be on the top of my head if I'm developing a fundraising strategy, but your fundraising team should be aware of that. So how do we create stability for you? Which funders can provide you with the most long-term security? Now, you're not going to count on one foundation to fund you for 20 years. You need friends and partners in the private foundation world who will recommend you to other foundations. And again, foundation money, I call it slow money because it takes 4 to 6 months to get to a yes, but the number of foundations being created in America never goes down. It always goes up every year. So our database has over 225,000 active grant makers in it at mid-year 2020. By the end of the summer, it's going to have more than 225,000 active grant makers in it. We're constantly adding grants and grant makers into Foundation Directory Online. Also look to create stability. Which additional funding streams might you be able to add to your funding mix? And the answer to this question is based on your case for support. The answer to this question is based on your ability to become close to expert at what corporations give to, at what foundations give to, at what community foundations give to, your ability to identify deep pockets amongst all the individuals who support you. The research is crucial here. How much time and effort will it take to secure additional funding partners? Especially for those of us who work in small shops, you only have 24 hours in a day. When you are looking for additional funders, when you're looking, let's say, to try to identify enough foundations to secure $60,000 in foundation grant money, the numbers, a lot of that goes back to your staff capacity to actually do the research, to make the pitches, and to actually do the application process. So these fundraising plans that you are crafting for your office should take in your capacity to actually do the work to fundraise. So these action plans, these fundraising plans that we're going to craft, you have to find a way to tease out of your management team the answer to this question. If you already say, I'm going to raise $60,000 from foundations, that's like one piece of your fundraising plan, that's definitely one strategy you've chosen right there, because your talking with your colleagues has revealed, the research reveals that possibly you're in the ballpark for 60,000. When you remember 2/3 of giving in America is from individuals, you're going to kind of figure out strategies to secure money from individuals. After this action plan tells me exactly how much money you're going to raise next year from individuals and how you're going to do it. Your fundraising plan tells me whether or not you're even looking at foundations. If you're looking at foundations, it's going to tell me how much money you expect to raise from foundations. And of those foundations that I see in your plan you're pitching to, it's going to tell me what month you expect to receive that grant money in and how much money you've asked them for. So you're going to set a revenue goal for each of these strategies. If you're going to raise money from corporations and businesses, I'm going to look at your plan and I'm going to see which months and how much you're raising from local businesses, as well as which months and how much you expect to be getting a larger amount from a multinational company. So when you're doing your action plan, when you're actually crafting it, you have to create a chart or timetable with some kind of description, as well as person responsible for that activity. I like to say, project your fundraising income by month so that when you close your books at the end of January, you're going to pull out your plan and see how much money you were supposed to have raised in January by what strategy and who was responsible. Certainly come April 1st, you close your books for the first quarter, you're going to pull out your plan and figure out, are you ahead of the game 3 months into the year raising money, or are you a little bit behind because one of your strategies didn't do as well as you projected it would have done a couple of months ago when you were creating your plan. So these plans do need like a calendar and a timetable, as well as a listing of which individual was responsible for it. So one example of this would be, let's say we decide that, maybe this year you raised 30,000 from foundation grants. The next year, perhaps a little bit of a stretch, but maybe not so. You think, I can double that. I can raise 60,000 in foundation grants by the end of the calendar year. Your development team will research potential prospects. They're usually the people I see and hear from using our database products all over America. And they will help you determine whether or not it's feasible and realistic for you to raise $60,000 in foundation grants. They're also telling me at what point in the year you have to apply. So they're going to give me a really fine-tuned sense of the application guideline process and deadlines. They're going to tell me how much I can expect to get from the New York Foundation, how much I can expect to get from the Surdna Foundation, how much do I think the Ford Foundation will actually fund for a specific project. So that should be happening really early on in the year. You know, maybe in this plan to raise $60,000 from foundation grants, you're going to get your board and staff involved. You make them review those prospects at the board meeting, and you always ask them if they have any connections. If you know somebody in the foundation, much easier to get your phone calls and emails returned. March and June, so we're already a little bit at the mid-year point. From March through June, your team is submitting proposals to potential prospects. And that covers you for the first 6 months. So how can we make all of this labor that just went into raising $60,000, how can we make this a better process next year? And remember, we go through the fundraising plans because it's teamwork. Together, everybody achieves more. It builds consensus among your team, and it helps you prioritize what your fundraising strategies should be in the first place. So your plan had like staff initials on it, people who were in charge of doing X, Y, and Z. You got to check in regularly. So I'm going to recommend checking in at least at a monthly level to see if you're on track. This is what we mean by actually implementing it and making sure everybody is doing what they were supposed to do. So there is a tremendous amount of communication internally and externally happening with these fundraising plans. You're going to evaluate it monthly, and of course at the end of the year, you definitely have to evaluate it because you have to decide what worked and what didn't work. Did we raise more money from individuals than we thought we were going to? How did we do it? Did we not secure as much corporate support as we thought we were going to secure? What worked? What didn't work? And, you know, your fundraising success builds, it's like building blocks. It builds the basis for next year's plan. And you'll have at least a year of experience working together on a plan. So year 2, it should move much better. You know, was the money raised worth the time and effort? So, you know, again, if you're going after foundation grants, don't depend on one foundation. Send out, you know, 3 times as many proposals as you think you actually need. 1 out of 3 proposals gets funded. So we already know that we're putting significant amounts of time into the pitch and the proposal writing process and the follow-up calls if you're going after foundation grant money. Was the money worth it? You know, worth all the time and effort? You know, one of the ways to make a simple plan of raising $60,000 in foundation grants even better, that first plan took you through the first 6 months, but your actual going through this process over 12 months might lead you to the decision that we need more input. So, you know, in this enhanced plan, we just don't forget about all of these proposals at mid-year. June, you get the board and staff involved again, and you make them help you review the status of pending and confirmed grants. You ask them what they know about this. And you can revise and edit as necessary. So, you know, come June, when you do your mid-year review of your foundation fundraising strategy, ask yourself how it's going. If it's not going well, all right, I've got July, August, September. I might be able to find another prospect that will take me through the second half of the year. If it's gone better than expected, well, I've got July, June, August, September, October. I've got a couple more months to try to build on my success. So again, the 6 steps for developing a fundraising plan. Identify your assets. Look at what's happening externally. That's the opportunities and threats part of it. What do we need to know about our operating environment next year, the year after next year? Identify your assets. This is going to tell you what your competitive advantage is. Definitely develop a case statement. I mentioned like the shortcut to a case statement might be you just give me 100 reasons why the public should be supporting you right now in the future. Definitely, you can write your case statement. There are a lot of case statements that I find on the internet. And, people always love to tell the world why they're worthy of your gift. That's why lots of case statements are on the internet. Set realistic fundraising goals for yourself. Realistic fundraising goals, that's the key there. Create this action plan. Create a fundraising plan. Implement it. Actually do the work. Get your team involved. And evaluate your plan monthly. And definitely, you're going to evaluate your plan by the end of the year because you're working on your fundraising plan year 2. So if you need a recording of today's class, you can definitely find a recording of Introduction to Fundraising Planning on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search for Candid, look at the videos. This class is there. You will also find a recording of today's class on grantspace.org, which is your online learning library. Thank you so much for attending today. You are so much better than these PowerPoint presentations. I would love to have individual conversations with you about what your key takeaways were, but we're not in the same room together. If you need to talk to us about this class, feel free to chat with our online librarians. You can find them on grantspace.org. Click on Ask Us, and you can have a conversation with their team about the contents of today's class. So, the key takeaways: know where you're starting and where you need to go. So, how well do you know yourself right now? Not you, how well do you know your nonprofit right now? Where do you need to go? What do you want to do 5 years from now? Everything comes with a price tag. That's going to help me figure out how much we need to raise. Diversify your funding streams. Look at all of the sources of income out there. There was the nonprofit revenue pie chart, which looked at nearly 50%. It was 47.5% of nonprofit revenue was earned income. Can you develop an earned income stream to offset, your fundraising abilities from individuals, foundations, corporations, and government agencies? So diversify your funding streams. Set realistic goals. Evaluate your fundraising plan and revise and edit, revise and edit. This year in particular, COVID-19, the pandemic, took all of us by surprise. And we really do hope that you are safe and well in your communities. Hopefully after today's class, you can pull out your fundraising plan and figure out where you might need to pivot this year, and start thinking about your 2021 revenue. Candid is here to help you succeed. Definitely use all of our resources. So you had handouts today. One of the handouts is an exercise that you can use within your own organization to facilitate a discussion about fundraising strategies you might employ over the next couple of months or in the next year. It's an assessment tool, which I'm going to highly recommend that you think about using with your own team. You'll have to give a little presentation to use that assessment tool to get folks talking and brainstorming. But when you have a chance to take a look at it, it actually makes your team tell you by using check marks, is this strategy very likely to pull in money or not likely at all? So that assessment tool allows you to walk your team through a discussion of what your chances are to get grants, gifts from individuals, foundations, corporations, and other types of organizations like the United Way, or possibly religious organizations if you're operating in that field. So do take some time to look at the asset inventory tool. The second handout that you have is definitely the class notes for today's presentation. Questions. Please remember to ask your questions to our online librarians, who you can reach on grantspace.org. That's grantspace.org. Use the Ask Us feature. What's next? We would really like you to consider taking a webinar version of Introduction to Finding Grants, as well as the self-paced e-learning click-through Practical Strategies for Finding New Donors. Today's speaker was Susan Shiroma. the Network Engagement Manager for the Northeast. And our moderator today is Alexis Flanagan, Network Engagement Manager for the Southern region of the United States. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Hope to meet you again on other webinars. Thank you. And do remember to sign up for the GrantSpace newsletter. Great way to stay in touch with us. Good luck this year with your fundraising. Stay safe, stay well, and we hope to see you at the next Candid webinar. Thank you.